Since, I
Oh,
know. Oh,
sorry. I should have said that. For purposes of today, because this is part of our testimony that's required by statute, the presentations will in fact be recorded. Sorry, I should have said that.
no problem. It's the button I always forget to hit. So I'm Ann Larson from the Council of State Governments, and really excited to talk to you all today about dispatch, about public safety answering points, and all the dynamics that go into the role of dispatch when we're thinking about community response and alternatives to law enforcement responses in your community. Next slide. So how we're going to spend our time today, we have got two amazing speakers that are going to really be taking up the bulk of the meeting. But we're going to do a quick welcome, introductions, and then just a brief project recap of why CSG is here and supporting the council. We're going to have a presentation from New Jersey on their public safety answering point. You'll hear it called PSAPs and dispatch landscape. We've got Andrew Demerin here from Denver Star, and Andrew really brings a great depth of knowledge of like how dispatch plays an integral role in these teams and how he and his team got from a place of co-response to community response in Denver. Plenty of time for discussion and questions and answers, and then a really quick wrap up and a reminder for our next meeting. So just real briefly, the Council of State Governments, we're a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that combines the power of a membership association that serves all three branches of government. And we really pride ourselves on policy and research expertise and really bringing folks together. My role at CSG is on Team Community Responder. As Tiffany mentioned, our team was impacted by the cuts in April. CSG lost 83% of their staff. So I was a team of 8, and now I am a team of 1, but I get Felicia to work with me alongside. But what we do is we really support communities. We see that this work is very hyper-local. And so we support communities by providing technical assistance, by bringing them together to work through and do these peer-to-peer learnings. We try to create and uplift publications and resources. We do events and presentations. We're having 2 webinars next week, and I'll be sure to follow up with if anyone's interested in. We're doing a webinar on data and evaluation, and then another one on community-led and the role of electeds. We do learning communities because we know that when we leave, we really want folks to have like a really great network of other peers in this space to connect with and do the work, and much more. We're a no wrong door sort of organization. You reach out to us and we'll do what we can to answer any questions and help direct you in the right direction. Our team is now myself and Felicia. I'm located on the West Coast. I'm in Olympia, Washington, and I started a community responder program in 2018. I think it was the second in the nation, and it is still going strong today. We also have a Familiar Faces program, but I've been at the Justice Center now for a little over 3 years and just really love being able to see what's happening nationally and continue to help support communities as they work through alternatives to law enforcement to really respond to folks in their community, oftentimes due to poverty, substance use, mental health, calls for service. Felicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm Felicia Lopez-Wright. I'm a project manager within the Behavioral Health Division, working alongside Ann on the Community Responder portfolio of work. I've been at CSG for 6 years, and prior to the funding cuts, I was working on Crisis Stabilization and Community Reentry, which is a Second Chance Act grant portfolio of work, which was relatively new. But since then, I've shifted over to our community responder work, and I've been really enjoying it. And I'm a proud resident of New Jersey. I've been here almost all of my life, so I just find it to be a really like silver lining that I get to support this project in my home state. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Felicia. And why we're here is because New Jersey signed on to be a part of our aligning health and safety. So Our current cohort is New Jersey, Utah, and Virginia. And what that really means is like I view aligning health and safety as we work with states to co-design an opportunity to really provide the support that states need to really improve their crisis coordination and their crisis systems. So our goal is to really to keep people with behavioral health needs out of the criminal justice system. We want to collect data from all the states and beyond to really figure out how to improve the crisis systems. Are there opportunities to support and scale? Sometimes we've got some really great local innovations, and like what are the learnings that we can use to support other communities and potentially scale those innovations and really improve coordination across programs and services. And so how does that look for New Jersey? Our goal is a coordinated ecosystem of care that ensures every person receives the right response at the right time, and that this dispatch conversation is really important for that. So like folks in New Jersey, when they call 911 or they call 988 or they call a number, they know what response is coming. Oftentimes we have a lot of great responses, but the systems themselves don't know what response each response does, and then the community gets confused as well. So I'm really excited for this conversation today around dispatch to think about when that call comes in, who answers the call, and how that call gets sent out. But we're here to provide support to the council. We're going to develop some materials and communication resources, co-design some recommendations that reflect the cross-branch approaches, and then provide support for at least one policy within our period, which ends in December 2025. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike Morgan.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Mike Morgan. First of all, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sitting in my truck at a police academy in East Brunswick on my cell phone. So just want to make sure everything's going smooth. So yeah, we'll go over 911 overview of New Jersey. And what you're going to see when Andrew and I do our presentations is basically, if you think of those TV commercials where the people have like sagging eyelids or whatever, the before and after. New Jersey is going to give like the before version because that's where we're at. And then Andrew he'll be going into after, like with everything that they do. I had the advantage of being out at their PSAP in October of last year, and I walked away in disbelief of how wonderful it is. And all the things they're able to do out there. So without further ado, if we go to our next slide, New Jersey's 911 network was started in 1989 through legislation that the state adopted. And the idea was to have where no matter where you are, and this is nationally, no matter where you are, you could place a 911 call and get help. The planning started in 1989. I was a police officer at the time. I was taken off the street temporarily for a couple of months to work on maps, which ended up being, for the most part, communications was attached to me until I retired from the police department 22 years ago. And then I came to the state to work with the 911 office here. We were one of only, I think it was roughly 5 states that had a statewide network. So if you hear the terms Next Gen 911, some of the things that other states looked at as being next generational, things that they were just going to be getting now, we were already doing back in 1990. We were on a Bell Atlantic, later called Verizon 911 network. In 2004, the system had to get replaced because one of the equipment manufacturers that the network ran on, Rockwell, manufacturer discontinued everything for the network. So Verizon bought up, they had tractor-trailer loads of spare parts here in Piscataway. And then we operated temporarily from 2004 to now. We've been operating temporarily on what's called the publicly switched telephone network. And it was okay to do because some of the things that were really cool features back in the 80s are things that you can get now. If you remember, there was like all the star codes for being able to call somebody back or look up a number, I believe, blocking numbers with a star 57, star 66. All those things became regular functions. So we were able to survive on that. One of the things we did do is in 2016, New York City approached us about connecting our networks. So in New Jersey, actually in any state, it's usually somewhat of a closed network. And we had to have it, we had issues on the Hudson River. New York City would be a person would be placing a cell phone call in New York City, and it would be hitting Fort Lee, New Jersey, which sits on cliffs 200 and some feet above New York City on the other side of the Hudson. And even though there was it became a big news item, it only took 19 seconds from the time the Bergen County, New Jersey 911 dispatcher transferred a call to the New York City 911 dispatcher that they were actually talking and able to find this person who needed assistance. That was done in 2016. New York City is in a process now of upgrading to the next gen 911 network. And I can tell you that last Wednesday, we did test calls from New Jersey to New York City, and it worked. So even as we move in the next generation, which we're about to do, we'll still have that connectivity between New Jersey and New York City. In, I guess, around 2017, they started planning on the next gen network. And in 2022, a contract was awarded to Lumen Technology to build our 911 network. We're in the process of doing that. We had 249 PSAPs across the state. We're down to 199 now, which is good. We want to get lower numbers of PSAPs. And so far, we've done a couple counties, Somerset County, Sussex County, we're still working on, and we're about to go into Bergen County. Bergen County is our largest county population-wise. It has 26 PSAPs. But as you can see, our next-gen logo there, we're eagerly getting into next-gen, which we've been telling PSAPs about for years. And now they don't believe it's happening, but it is happening. Next slide, please. So our network is a state-owned network, and it's just one network. It has a lot of redundancy and diversity built into it, but some areas, some other states, it may be each town has their own network, or a group of towns may have a network, or there's some places that still, to this day, don't have 911 service outside of New Jersey. If you look at on the right side, the then now, when we first started, the only thing that needed 911 was landline. So it was somewhat easy by using the central offices which is where your phone line goes from your house to the first place where it's touching the phone company, building a 911 network from there. And then if there's anybody here old enough, you may remember car phones where the phone was wired in your car, and if you were driving outside of your area, you had like a 7 or 8 digit roaming number you had to dial first before you could dial the phone number. Now you look at what we have. We have the wireless, like everybody's cell phones, wireline, which is still a good number. It's about 15% of our calls come in on wireline still. The rest come in wireless. VoIP, which is voice over internet protocol, which with VoIP, most likely you don't, if you have one of the big carriers, you don't even realize it's VoIP and not wireline. Like Verizon offers a VoIP service if you get it through them. Comcast Cable in New Jersey, the different larger cable providers, you'll have VoIP where they're able to still provide you that connectivity, that static phone located in your home. There's other VoIP carriers that, because of deregulation, you may have small companies that try to get into the telephony industry with VoIP and may not totally understand how to do things. And we run into issues with those. And a good example in New Jersey is school districts. You know, everybody wants to get the cheapest thing they can. And it's not unusual for us to have a school district where you may have 12 schools in a district. If they call 911, instead of the address of that particular school coming up on our screens, we're getting the address of the Board of Ed because they're the one that bought the system, and their phone provider has no idea how to set the system up to dial 911 with the address from each school. That's stuff that, you know, we deal with. And I believe it was 2016, we started text to 911. It's an option, it's not required to have it, but in New Jersey, if you have texting and your carrier provides it, then you're able to text messages to 911. We also have what's called telematics. You may know it as OnStar, Ford Sync, things like that, where you know, the vehicle can call and provide location information. And then there's the wearables. Just on a side note, Andrew and I were talking about his 1-year-old and my 2 1-year-old grandchildren. And I guess when I made the slide, I made it, I think I ended up being Weebles instead of wearables. Andrew caught that, corrected it. So, but if you have an Apple Watch and you do fall down, you have about 60 seconds to cancel it, or it will dial 911 and it'll provide the latitude and longitude, which is like the compass location of where you're at on a map, to a 911 center. And the idea ultimately is any device would be capable of contacting 911 anywhere in the country, or actually even out of the country. A lot of corporations have facilities here. People come in from overseas, and they can dial the number they're used to at home. If they're from the UK, they would dial 999 here, and it's going to get to a PSAP here. If you dial 112, that'll get to a PSAP here. Every once in a while, on social media, you'll see use 112 instead because 911 could be busy. Well, it's going to the same place. That's just like an urban legend that's faster. And also, we get the telephone number display. Now we're set up for the US where it's a 10-digit display. It's your area code, your local exchange, and then your 4-digit number. Some countries have, I think the smallest is maybe 5 digits for a phone number, and I think the largest is like 13 or 15. We can only get 10, so that does cause some issues if somebody from a country that's got a longer phone number dials 911, but it's something we can work with. Next slide. So on our network, New Jersey provides the network basically from the point of the phone network when you're dialing 911. In other words, you're dialing on your phone. When it's traveling across the network, it's going to be on the Lumen network that we're paying for. And then we deliver it to the PSAP to kind of figure it's like the back room, like if it was your house, the room where your cable and phone lines came in, like next to your washing machine or something. We're delivering the 911 calls across fiber to the back room of the PSAP. And then it's on a 7-foot tall rack of computer equipment that we provide. Then it's up to the individual PSAP they have to pay to connect the equipment to that network. We have statutory regulations, for instance, use requirements. and this is where we get it in the submissions with 988 we've been talking to them about. In New Jersey, by law, if you dial 911, you give up your rights to privacy. You're giving us the ability to look up your name and phone number and address so we can help you, which is a total opposite from the anonymity that 988 looks for. Access for it, everybody's required to have the ability to dial 911 in New Jersey. And if you see there's an acronym there, CLEC, and phone industry loves their acronyms. But a CLEC is basically a competitive local exchange carrier. In New Jersey, we have several phone companies that provide dial tone to you. Verizon's the biggest one, that where you can pick your phone up and you have dial tone. That's Verizon. But there's also, in other parts of our state, there's Monmouth Telegraph and Telephone. There is Warwick Valley Altiva up in the upper left corner in Sussex County. And we also have Brightspeed, which was called Embark, and it was Union Telephone and Telegraph before that. So all those companies and the VoIP providers I was telling you about have to be able to provide 911, which means they have to connect to our 911 network. And in our state regulations, the state covers the cost of them connecting to our network. There's also fees. We have in New Jersey, we have a 90-cent surcharge. That's the 911 and emergency response service fee. That means that 90 cents isn't going just to 911. Actually, the part of it that goes to 911 just covers our phone bill, for the 911 network, and the cost of our office to be run, and the cost of these certified local exchange carriers and Verizon to provide the service. We have equipment requirements in our regulations to tell you what kind of equipment, not brand name, but what's required that it do. It must be able to do transfers. It must be able to call back the call or things like that. Staffing levels, we just have guidelines. We do not have requirements for staffing. New Jersey has a law called state mandate, state pay. If we mandate things, that the state has to pay for it. So we don't mandate things like staffing levels. Training requirements, we do have minimal training requirements. And then our office provides certifications for some things, and we provide some training. The service requirements, one of the requirements is that every telecommunicator has to have basic telecommunicator training, and they have to have 8 hours of refresher training each year on that, like CEUs that you would get with any other profession. If they do EMS dispatch, and this is where it's going to get into what you're more interested in. If they do EMS dispatch, they have to be certified as emergency medical dispatcher, which they can do. And the basic courses, by the way, we don't offer a basic course, but there's enough companies out there that do offer, you can get it from those companies. EMD certification, we do offer a free training course that uses our EMD guide cards, which are cards that guide the call taker into what questions to ask. So they're not locked into like a computer protocol of you have to ask this, then this, then this. As well as it gives pre-arrival instructions where they can ask the person, is the person breathing? Once they get the person somewhat stabilized, they can say, okay, go make sure the front door is unlocked, so the ambulance can get into your house, things like that. But the agency themselves provide the staffing and the equipment. Next slide, please. And then the hierarchy of it, the federal government established the requirement to have 911, and they put it in the Department of Transportation under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration under post-crash care, so that it's a method of getting help to people. The EMT program, I'm not sure if it's still under that, but it used to be under the federal highway system as well as traffic incident management, which is where I'm at right now. is what's one of the things that NHTSA wants PSAPs to get more involved in is with traffic incident management. The sooner you get the incident off the road, the sooner things get back to normal, but more importantly, the less chance of a first responder getting hit by vehicles. So then we have our state office, and we currently have, I am the director, and then I have right now 4 people under me. We're trying to backfill so we have enough people for serving all the counties properly. We have 21 counties in New Jersey. Each county has a county coordinator. And one of the roles, usually the county coordinator has multiple jobs because this isn't a full-time job necessarily. But one of the things they have to do is they kind of are the flow of communication between our office and the local PSAPs. And like I said, we have 199 PSAPs. So depending on the county, you could have a county that has one county-wide PSAP like Hunterton, or you could have a county like Bergen that's got 26. Essex, I believe, has more PSAPs than they do towns. You know, things like that. And we have, our office operates right now with 3 regions, North, Central, and South. So we kind of broke it down that way just so you can see that. Next slide, please. So some of our current projects, right now, we're migrating to a next generation 911 network. Right, people have the old copper network from the 1980s. Nothing wrong with that, mind you, but that's the network we have right now, and we're updating to a fiber optic network that will be able to be more internet-based, protocol-wise, so it can do more things than just carrying phone lines. As a matter of fact, with the current network, we have to have 2 sets of circuits go to each PSAP. One is a voice circuit and one's a data circuit, which that data circuit carries the information that goes up on what's called an alley screen, which shows the location of the caller, their phone number, their name, things like that. Another thing we're going to be working on soon is updating our emergency medical dispatch guide cards. Normally we add things. For instance, COVID was added, avian flu, they get added. Any of that stuff comes from the Office of Emergency Medical Services and the Department of Health. And we're looking at working with them on getting the cards up to speed to the current standard of care, because there's a good chance that some of these cards haven't been looked at or updated in quite some time. The third thing we're working on right now is 988 transfer to and from the PSAPs. And where we're at with that is, I'd say in the last 2 years or so, we've started working together, meeting regularly, trying to move things along, and battling that, a couple different things. One of the things was the privacy aspect versus the anonymity of it, how we can deal with that. Also, the call routing for 988 callers. The way it was originally set up was a 988 caller, because we're not using their location information, was being routed based on the area code of their phone number. So for instance, I live in Jersey, but right outside of Philadelphia. My daughter, one of my daughters, has a Manhattan area code on her phone. If she were to call 988 from our house outside of Philadelphia, it's going to be going to somewhere in New York City. So that's an issue. And Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're in the process, or hopefully maybe completed, changing how they route calls from being by area code to actually being the same way that the wireless 911 calls are routed, based on the device location. Now, where are we at with that? We also took those EMD guide cards that I was telling you needed updated, and they were able to develop under the behavioral health guide cards for people that may be in crisis that give them instructions of what to do. And then the idea would be, if there's a decision made that the dispatcher should conference in 988, they can do so. Technically, it's not a problem for us to do a transfer. Matter of fact, our requirements are that there is 8 fixed transfers on the screen for 911 calls that come in. Those fixed transfers were initially police, fire, medical, a medevac dispatcher, poison control, a TDD machine, a canned message for non-emergency calls, and a canned message for redundant calls. What we've come to find out is, since 911's existed in New Jersey, no 911 caller has ever been transferred directly to a helicopter dispatcher. So we took that button and repurposed it so that that New York City connection I was talking about before, that's now that button on all our PSAPs in the state. They can just press that button and it's going to connect the caller to New York City's 911. The other button that's still available for us to use is, our 911 came into place before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So at that point, you only needed one TDD device, which usually sat on a back shelf next to the phone book by a coffee maker with something sitting on top of it. And you'd have to transfer the caller from the 911 caller to that TDD device so you could communicate with them. When the Americans with Disabilities Act came out, they said, no, they have to be treated the same. You have to have the TDD equipment at every PSAP position. So that freed up that button. So my intent is, as we migrate to the next gen 911, we're going to repurpose that button to be the 988 transfer button. Where we're at now is we have the ability to do the transfer. We have the guide cards to do the transfer. We're awaiting approval of New Jersey Attorney General's office, which is apparently there's like a bilateral review going on, because different agencies have different deputy attorney generals. So we're working through that. And then the fourth thing that we're working on is looking at introducing traffic incident management, integration, and training. I took over this position 2 years ago, and at the time, all we were doing was 911. And talking to people at NHTSA at the federal level, finding out, and talking to people like Andrew in Denver, finding out what additional things that we should be doing now, should have the responsibility for, like 988 and traffic incident management. We're trying to get that geared up as well. Next slide, please. And again, here's the update on 988. Right now, it's I think it was 1-800-273-TALK was the phone number for crisis, and it's been changed to 988. So you dial that, and it's going to connect you. And our PSAPs, we have our largest PSAPs in New Jersey have 50 positions. The 988 people, one of our meetings, we had one of these, you show me yours, I'll show you mine meetings. We went to their call center on the Rutgers University campus, and I was floored by what they have. Their call center, they have 2 rooms. Each room has 104 positions. And that gives you an idea of how, how sad, how large the issue of mental health is right now with people, that they have to have that many positions. They are also, no matter, excuse me, what the different programs are you call, it's going to still go into that same center. So we have cop to cop, we have teacher to teacher, where A cop in crisis can call that number and now he's going to speak to a cop. We have veterans. There's a retired 2-star general that runs this whole call center for I guess for Rutgers. But the veterans crisis line is there. So there is, it should be easy enough for us to transfer things over. It's just a matter of, as you'll see that little red flag on the slide there, we're waiting notification from the AG's office that that we've all been green lighted. That's okay to go forward with that. Next slide, please. And just to kind of bring it all together, hopefully ongoing projects like our 988 integration and updating the EMD guide cards, demonstration of New Jersey's commitment to modernization and mental health support. I believe the next one is just saying, if you have questions, here's my email. If you want to flip to that. Yep, that's me.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that in-depth walkthrough of New Jersey dispatch. I'm going to jump over to Andrew since I want to make sure that he has plenty of time to talk about the integration into 911 of community responders.
Great.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ann. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was just going to say, I apologize. I'm Irish. I tend to talk too much. So.
No worries. You're up, Andrew.
All right. Well, thank you, Ann, and thank you to the council for giving us the opportunity to come kind of chat with you all and share some of our information. So Ann introduced me earlier as Andrew Dameron with STAR, which is kind of correct. My title is the Director of 911 for the city and county of Denver, but we manage a lot of the operational oversight for the Support Team Assisted Response, or STAR, which is our crisis response program here in Denver. We have licensed clinicians and EMTs or paramedics that we are dispatching here in 911 to certain call types. So I think kind of the idea of what CSG wanted me to talk about was this is one potential end state as you all are designing what this looks like for the state of New Jersey. This is one option just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what we do in Denver. There are other models around the country that I'll talk about a little bit that you should absolutely consider, but this is kind of how things go here. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Felicia. So just as a little bit of background, Denver 911, we are a civilian agency. We are separate from the Denver Police Department or Denver Sheriff's Office. Most 911 centers you will find across the state usually fall within the law enforcement agency. And that's typically because about 75 to 80% of the calls for service that come through 911 have a law enforcement element, which is why law enforcement has typically taken responsibility for that 911 piece. That is also why we have a history in this country of law enforcement being the default responder when there are calls that don't have a clear response option otherwise. So mental health, behavioral health, narcotics use, unhoused neighbors, that sort of thing. For a long time, the police have been the only option that we've had. And so the work that you all are doing, which is really exciting, the work that cities like Denver and Seattle and Albuquerque and Durham have done has been designed to create an additional kind of dispatch response option. So we manage around 2 million calls a year coming from our PSAP. Michael used that acronym earlier. For anybody who doesn't know, that is a public safety answering point, which is one of the acronyms that describes a 911 center. Ours has about 64 seats, and we have a team of about 250. From here, we manage that call volume, and then we also dispatch police, Denver Fire, Denver Health Paramedics, and our STAR team. Next slide. So background on how this all started in Denver. Back in 2016, the Denver Police Department started a co-responder program where they had licensed clinicians paired with police officers responding to certain call types. So if a call came through 911 that clearly had a mental health, a behavioral health nexus, then we could send one of those co-responder teams where law enforcement was still responding, but then we also had somebody with a clinical lens and a different level of subject matter expertise on scene. Go ahead and go to the next slide. After a couple of years of that program, a couple of things started to happen. First, the clinicians that were responding with law enforcement started to kind of chat. They were going, you know, we're going to a lot of calls that the police officer is just twiddling his thumbs. He does not need to be going to these calls. We could be handling these on our own. Maybe we need to talk about a completely civilian response option. And at the same time, we had a lot of kind of leading community voices in the Denver area who were asking for something that didn't involve your traditional public safety response. And so conversations began around kind of creating this program. There were a team of folks in, I think, 2018 who went out to Eugene to meet with the Cahoots program, which was the first of its kind. It began in the 70s. And basically, we stole everything we possibly could about how they did things in Eugene, brought it back to Denver, and built our own version. And the design was, as I said, a clinician and a paramedic or EMT, but law enforcement was not a part of the response. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The other thing that was integral in our design and philosophy and the use and the development of this program was that the call intake, triage, and dispatch function needed to live within 911. And as I mentioned, there are other models out there. If you look at the state of Virginia, they actually have a state level law that has required that 988 take on responsibility for dispatching these programs around the state. Now, some of these programs existed prior to 988. So the 988 team in Virginia is now having to reach out to these different communities, these cities and counties that have existing crisis response programs and figure out how they coordinate statewide response. I haven't talked to them in a year or two, so I don't know how that is going. But when I talked to them a while ago, it was a Herculean task. Alternatively, there are cities like Atlanta, Georgia, that when they stood up their program, they wanted, in their own words, a firewall between law enforcement and this crisis response. And so they didn't want 911, which is a part of the police department there, to have any involvement in making the decision about who to send. So their decision was to partner with the city's 311 program. So in Atlanta, if you need law enforcement, fire, or paramedics, you call 911. If you need a mental health response, you call 311. In Denver, our philosophy was people are calling 911 for everything already, right? And our view was the low-hanging fruit and really the biggest impact that we could have with a program like this would be to divert these calls from a law enforcement response. So if we could train our 911 call takers to identify when a call doesn't need police, when in fact it would benefit from a clinical lens, or even if it doesn't have a behavioral health or mental health nexus, but it's not something that requires an armed law enforcement officer, how can we kind of funnel those off from police response, let the cops, operate at the high end of their skill set and manage, criminal activity and investigations and that sort of thing, and then create a new team where the high end of their skill set is supporting individuals in the community and ensuring that they have the resources that we need. So Denver 911 took on responsibility for that effort. We started by identifying 7 call types that would be STAR eligible. And the way it works, when you dial 911, your 911 center is going to ask you some questions. And basically, they're trying to figure out what is going on, what is the nature of your problem. And then from there, they have policy, procedure, or as Michael was talking, guide cards that will actually then direct what type of response goes based on that. So we took these initial 7, we've expanded it to include an additional 3. And the idea is that if a call comes through with one of these nature codes, it is, at least on the face, eligible for an alternative response. Our call takers are then required to interrogate the caller, ask some additional questions, and figure out if there's anything that would preclude STAR from responding. But what we're trying to do is start from the position of STAR is the default, not police. STAR is the default. And if we learn anything that says, oh, actually, you know what, STAR can't go to this one, the guy's got a weapon and he's threatening to use it, there's, you know, criminal activity, then we may need to engage police. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so this is kind of a basic overview of our call intake workflow. The main thing is at the bottom, we are trying to establish STAR as the fourth response option, right? So 911 call comes in, a non-emergency call comes in. We have 4 response options. It could either be police, STAR, fire, or paramedics. And what we want to do is, you know, in the early days of STAR, especially during the pilot, police was still very much the default. And STAR was a nice to have, kind of a nice alternative if they were available and if, you know, the dispatcher remembered that they existed and all of that. Now, what we have been trying to do is go, no, these are dedicated units. They are their own thing. We're trying to professionalize it. So we are doing things like, you know, so again, because it was coming out of the police department, still to this day, STAR is dispatched by our police dispatchers. So the call taker takes the call, they ask the questions, and they determine if it's STAR eligible. If it is, they flag it by putting a note in the comments section. And then when it gets shipped to the police dispatcher, the dispatcher then tries to dispatch STAR, who are operating on the police radio channels. This has contributed to that issue of police kind of still being the default and then STAR is available if they're available. What we have done is we have established a citywide channel for STAR. We have created a dispatch position for STAR here within Denver 911. And now I'm just trying to get funding together so that I can staff that dispatch position. But the idea is it is no longer a subset of police stuff. They are their own thing. And everything that we are doing is in kind of furtherance of that effort. Go ahead to the next slide. That's the basic overview. It was very brief, but I figured, you know, given the work that you all are doing, you probably have a lot of questions specific to the needs of New Jersey. So happy to chat further.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Michael. I want to open up the floor for any questions.
So I will start a little bit. So Andrew, can you just, what's your interaction with 988? Obviously here in New Jersey, our 988 has a response team that's attached to it. Does that exist in Denver? And what is your interaction with them? Or how do you envision that sort of in your tree that has STAR as a response option?
No, that's an excellent question. So the state of Colorado, in Colorado, we are fortunate that we have, and I don't know if it's the same in New Jersey, but we have a single 988 provider for the entire state. That's not the case everywhere. I remember talking to somebody who was managing 988 for Kansas City, and they had something like 9 different providers, you know, several on the Kansas side, several on the Missouri side. So it was kind of a convoluted mess. In Colorado, we're very fortunate to have a single 988 provider. Because STAR kind of predated 988, that is still our, I guess you could say, our default option for mental health and behavioral health needs. The exception being certain call types that clearly do not need an on-scene response, but where the individual just needs to talk to somebody. So we do have a policy in place. We have a dedicated line where we can transfer folks kind of into the back end of 988, so they're not hitting the queue and having to wait. We can get them directly to a 988 call taker. The only complication there is the state of Colorado recently opened a new contract with a new 988 provider. And so we are still trying to kind of reestablish those lines of communication. But it is something that we're kind of doing on a statewide basis. So all of the 911 centers around the state, we are encouraging them to make those contacts, create those policies and procedures, and make sure that they can transfer calls, because we do have plenty of communities that don't have a response program, a co-response program, or a program like STAR. And so for them, 988 represents a much bigger partner and kind of change agent in the way they've always done things. So there's a lot more opportunity for collaboration there. As to an actual response arm, so 988, back before it was 988, when it was just a crisis hotline, there was a state level crisis response program. It was very, very small. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 response units for the entire state. So it wasn't something that we really utilized in Denver. And I honestly, I don't know the current status of that program. It's been in flux a little bit.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
Tessa?
Hi, everyone. Andrew, thanks for that presentation. And it's pretty amazing what you guys have been able to do. I've heard about STAR often. So I'm excited to hear, about the success you guys are having locally. How did you get the buy-in in your local community? Well, for us, in New Jersey, we're going to have different sites. Transparently, my organization is also going to be a site in Paterson, New Jersey. So I guess for those sites that are launching this brand new, how did you create the culture and environment for those sites that are launching where you're getting the buy-in, that you're being embedded into 911 system? How did you even start?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So as far as buy-in from the community, that came organically. We had a lot of community organizers who were really pushing for this. As far as buy-in with the Denver Police Department, the benefit of having, before we launched the pilot in June of 2020, we had 4 years of a co-responder program where the Denver Police Department, and I'm telling, I wasn't there for this, but I'm repeating stories that I've heard from folks who were involved in that project. But that at the beginning of the co-responder program, the Denver Police Department was very reticent about it. They're like, great, we've got these delicate snowflakes who want to talk about their feelings, and we're going to walk into a house, it's a dangerous situation, and they're going to get themselves stabbed or shot. And then what they found was, not only was that not true, but these clinicians showed up in a very different way, right? And I'm generalizing here, but police officers, because they are trained to be prepared for the worst case scenario, they've got to be prepared to walk into a situation and control it. Whereas a clinician, that's not a part of their training. So they show up very, very differently. And I can remember one of the clinicians saying, they walked into a house where they had somebody who was in acute mental health crisis, and he just sat down on the floor next to this guy. And the cop that he was with was losing his mind. He's like, what are you doing? You're putting yourself in danger. And then he just proceeded to show him, no, I'm just getting at his level. I'm meeting him where he's at. And so there was this slow culture shift within DPD where they were like, no, these clinicians are fantastic. And they really saw the value in the work that they were doing. When it came to STAR, there was again some reticence. What do you mean we're not going to show up with them? But again, over time, they began to see the value, and it actually didn't take long where over 1/3 of the calls for service that were coming in for STAR were referrals from police officers, where based on what we received in 911, there were some scene safety concerns. So we send police, they get there and go, you know what, we are not needed here. Can you send STAR instead? Then as far as buy-in on my team, much like law enforcement, I have a lot of dispatchers who have been sending cops to these types of calls, some of them for 20 or 30 years. And so to suddenly ask them to shift their mindset and to send unarmed civilians to these calls was a big ask. And so what we did is we approached it in a couple of different ways. Anybody who's read or seen Simon Sinek, we started with why. Why are we doing this? What is the reason that this is needed? And then we also made sure that we had policy and procedure in place, that it was signed off by the city attorney's office, so that our dispatchers knew it was the city and the agency taking liability and responsibility for doing this. And as long as you follow that policy, it is not on your head if something goes wrong. And, you know, it's been 5 years now, and we've never had anything go wrong, knock on wood. So, you know, matter of fact, we feel like we could probably start to expand our call types a lot more, because, you know, the clinicians are not going into anything where they feel like they're kind of getting outside of their comfort zone from a safety perspective, generally speaking. So it is a culture shift, and it's one that is happening slowly, but we're trying to approach it again from why, and then quality assurance. That's the other big thing. In 911, quality assurance is a really important thing of what we do. We go back and we review calls, we provide feedback. There's this kind of, you know, kind of this high resiliency organization thing that exists in healthcare and aviation. And we're doing the same thing with these call types. Matter of fact, we're even implementing some really cool AI tools to expand our ability to kind of audit and review a larger number of these call types and get a better understanding of how we're doing as an agency, not just individual call takers and dispatchers.
Can I ask a follow-up question or no? Okay. So I guess Anne, Felicia, and Tiffany, this is where so locally our programs are not, you know, as far as the crisis response team for these pilots that we're going to launch, they are with community-based, right? Where these are often people that are not EMTs and not licensed professionals, right? So in this process, I'm just, because I'm hearing you, Andrew, and I think that's great that the city and these agencies have stakeholdership and they were able to sign off to, you know, kind of make this stuff go forward. I'm just thinking for us that are going to implement this around the state, most of us are community-based response organizations, right? That we are not licensed professionals and clinicians, and we're not EMTs. Are we going to get guidance through this advisory group of like trainings that you guys think are best practices to support these teams? And second, do we have like a baseline of policies and procedures that should be implemented in best practices before, so that we can make sure that, I'm going to be honest, just from a risk-based thing, like, you know, not getting sued, getting the right, because I just don't want to, I don't want any of these teams to be just out there in the wind, right? Like, hey, you guys are implementing this and you don't really have any protection, right? Because you're trying to do what's right in your community and help people and hopefully reduce the, you know, any interaction that could have been done through mental health or community-based responses. So I guess through this advisory group, and this is a long question, but what are we going to do to help guide these boards, right? For policy procedures to get that city buy-in, that's so important, right, Andrew? So that people aren't saying, oh, these groups were given money, they're just out here responding to these crisis calls, but they're not licensed professionals, right? But we are going to implement these, right? So I just want to know what do you guys think of how do we do this?
Well, if you don't mind, Ann, I'll jump in real quick. The decision in Denver to use licensed clinicians and paramedics was mostly driven by the two biggest and most capable partners that we had. And that was the Mental Health Center of Denver, which was our biggest community mental health center. And that's just kind of what they do, is they provide licensed clinicians. And then Denver Health Paramedics Division, that's what they do, is they provide paramedics. So we kind of started with kind of the top tier options already. I can tell you that there are plenty of examples elsewhere that don't follow that same modality. In fact, Cahoots actually developed a community training program where they could have community members just who volunteer. They go through this training, which was fairly extensive. But when our team went out there, one of the folks that they rode with was a bartender who just went through this training, and he volunteered a few days a week on the Cahoots van. So there are other options out there. It doesn't have to be a licensed clinician. And I will also say that we didn't go with licensed clinician and paramedic for any sort of liability rules. It was just, those were the resources we had readily available. And, you know, we do have designs of developing, you know, a multi-tiered response system within STAR, right? Where somebody in acute crisis, we can send them a licensed clinician. Because one of the benefits of having a licensed clinician is if that person needs to be put on an involuntary mental health hold, something that we try to avoid at all costs, but we want that clinician to be able to do it rather than having to call in a police officer that could just make the situation worse. But we don't need that on every single call. We don't need that on the vast majority of calls. So could we have peer navigators? Could we have community volunteers? These are all the things that I think are on the roadmap of what we're trying to design. I'll be honest, we have stalled in the evolution of the STAR program in Denver. I think the team here at 911 is still doing a really good job of trying to continue to evolve what it looks like as far as our participation. But there are a lot of other cities in the country that are doing some really cool things with some of this. And Anne can absolutely put you in touch with anyone and everyone.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, Liza, I hear your question is kind of like a workforce question and also a dispatch question. Felicia and I will be able to provide a bunch of resources. I know our time with you all, you know, is limited during these meetings, but we're really here to provide a bunch of resources and information throughout the process. But in Olympia, we did not have clinicians. We just had folks. We did scenario-based interview questions, like how are you gonna respond to someone that needs to move along but will not move along? And so we took scenarios from our housing providers, from current first responders of what are situations that you would have wanted a different response? And then we asked those scenario-based questions. One of my best crew team members who's still there to this day, so he's been there 6 years, worked in the funeral business for 30 years, and someone that can sit in grief like that and bring that calming presence. We had folks that had GEDs, and we had folks that had masters, but they were all, we called them behavioral health specialists. And we really just wanted people that wanted to work outside in the Pacific Northwest 365 days a year, including Christmas, including Easter, including holidays. And that's what we looked for. I think the challenge, and we can give examples, is there is a natural barrier for certain community members to be able to be on police radio. And I think Andrew will be able to talk about that. We have seen teams that are now on fire dispatch. So like the Oakland macro team is dispatched out of Oakland Fire. They also have their own line that goes into Oakland Fire dispatch. So somebody can call that line and go right into Oakland Fire dispatch and be dispatched out of Oakland Fire. And so we're seeing creative ways that teams are being able to be dispatched through 911 and not necessarily be on the police channel.
Yeah, and Lisa, I will just, and we talked about this in our early meetings as well. The unique nature of this particular council is that this council's charge is to, at the end of this process, and informed by the challenges and successes of the pilots, to come up with a potential recommendation for what a community crisis response team would look like in the state of New Jersey. Not necessarily that one of the models that exists now is the model. Or maybe it is because we go more local based. So to Andrew's point, and I think it's probably, important to point out, Andrew's talking about one city, a very large city in Colorado, but it is not the entirety of Colorado. And maybe it doesn't work in another city in Colorado because maybe their dispatch goes through fire, or maybe their dispatch is completely independent, or maybe their dispatch is and will always remain within police. And so those are the things that this committee is going to have to look at when making its recommendation. And I think part of it, to his point before, here in New Jersey, we do have MCORTS, which is the response arm of 988. And so maybe and David, don't kill me, but like maybe the recommendation from this group at the end is that community crisis response teams should partner more closely with M-Courts as long as there's bilateral communication between 988 and 911, because they're the natural person to incorporate a community response. Like those are all things on the table. So I know that for someone who wears both hats, there's like a frustration of, isn't the state going to tell us how to do this? And I think the answer is no, because we don't want to put our finger on the scale of what this looks like. But we do have CSG, who has a font of a Rolodex of people like Andrew who are available to help share with some of the groups that are doing this work. Like there are some places around the country that are doing this, or obviously we've got David, so he has access to the M-Courts teams, and we've got Michael on this board who can answer, you know, more detailed questions related to PSAPs, because Paterson's unique in the fact that the city of Paterson's PSAP sits with fire, which is very much a minority in this state. And so what does that look like? And so I think you will find that this group and CSG and the people that are on here can maybe provide some resources to help you all, but in terms of providing, you know, guidelines and things like that, we're learning along with you. So we wouldn't necessarily be the most equipped to say, here's what you should do. And I think there's people on this call who also represent other pilots that are doing it different than you all are proposing. So we wouldn't even know what to make. Like we couldn't make a standardized best practice like guideline yet, because you're all even doing it differently than each other, which is great for information when we get to our final report. Frustrating for you guys now, which I totally understand. Aaliyah, I just want to make sure that, because we generally take questions from council members first, just because it's their meeting, but we won't ignore you, I promise.
I'm trying to put my hand up here and I don't seem to be doing it well.
Go ahead, Carolyn. We'll pretend we saw it. Go ahead.
I have my little arrow, but I don't know where the hand went. Hi, I'm Carolyn Beauchamp, and I'm with the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. I want to go back to process, because these interventions in the community are so crucial, but I'd like to know if you could take it a step further. Once you've made the interventions, where are they going? What are you finding? Do you have to follow up? Is there a process to follow up? Do you have enough resources? All of those are questions that we're struggling with too.
So it's an excellent question. And the way that we have tackled that in Denver, and this is actually something that we're incredibly proud of, is that, again, alongside us the whole way, we've had a lot of community activists who have been advocating for more of a community approach to this. So what we actually have now is, so STAR is the responder. They're there to respond, de-escalate, and then get that person headed in a different direction. But then from there, we actually have a multi-million-dollar contract with a cadre of community nonprofits. These are nonprofits that specialize in, kind of mental health, behavioral health supports that are linguistically focused. You know, we have one group that specializes in working with the Spanish-speaking community, groups that specialize in the Pacific Islander community. We have Muslim Family Services. We have a group that specializes in working on keeping kids out of gangs. And what we're able to do then is refer these individuals to that group, and then they take it from there. So the wraparound services are actually occurring within these community nonprofits, rather than the city and county of Denver government saying, okay, now we've got to carry these people from start to finish and figure out housing and all of that. We still have a lot of that infrastructure in place, and Denver Human Services and our housing infrastructure is available as a resource. But you know, what we really tried to be responsive to was this ask by our community members of, hey, let us take some of this burden. And it's working pretty well so far.
Great.
Aaliyah or David, I don't know which one of you wants to go next.
If David is a council member, I'll yield my time to him.
Okay. Does Denver have the crisis receiving and stabilization centers that SAMHSA? Okay. How's that played into this?
Yeah, so those are kind of separate from the STAR program, but they are options that we have available. So we have a couple that we've set up, one of which is our my brain just, somebody turned off the light switch. In any event, it is a drop-off center that we established for first responders only. So it actually predates the STAR program, where police, paramedics, and now STAR can drop folks off. And it's a 3-floor facility that's staffed 24/7 with nursing and medical staff. The first floor is kind of like a 24-hour stabilization floor. The second floor is kind of less than a week as you try and get this person further stabilized or maybe into some supportive housing. And then there's actually a long-term housing floor on the third floor. So that's one resource that we have. However, I will say that some of the feedback that we get from the crews on the STAR vans is that the options just aren't there, right? There's nowhere to take people, particularly, what was it, last year when we had thousands of migrants being bussed up from Texas, being dropped off in Denver. We had nowhere to take folks. We had families with children in the middle of winter who had nowhere to go. And so the STAR vans would be called because it's a family that has nowhere to go. STAR shows up and then they try and take them to a migrant shelter, to a homeless shelter, and they're just saying, no, I'm sorry, there's no room at the end. So that's an extreme example because that was kind of outstanding circumstances. But even just on a normal day-to-day basis, there's a real shortage of kind of supportive housing and shelter within Denver. And from talking to other cities, it is not unique to Denver. This is a nationwide problem. So that is still a challenge. What STAR serves to do then is to provide some of those anecdotal stories that then I can throw up the chain to city council or the mayor's office and say, hey, just, you need to know, this is what STAR is seeing. Here's a call that we had where we had somebody who, the shelter system in Denver really struggles with any sort of advanced life directive. So if you're in a wheelchair, if you're on oxygen, most of the shelters won't take you. And so when we hear that, we go, yeah, we need to relay this up the chain. We need to kind of help drive some of that systemic change, but it's one of those where we have to recognize what is within our sphere of control, and unfortunately, that is well outside of it.
Thank you.
And if I could just jump in, Andrew, the drop-off center is called WellPower. Is it WellPower, Behavioral Health Response?
So WellPower is the new name of the Mental Health Center of Denver. They changed their name because they expanded outside of Denver. So now they're called WellPower. It's the Solution Center. That's what it's
Behavioral
called.
Health Solution Center, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
WellPower is the community mental health center that staffs our vans. They also staff the clinicians for the co-responder program, and they also staff the clinicians for the Solution Center. They're fairly ubiquitous in Denver.
Awesome. So if you folks want to Google that, they come right up.
This is what happens when Felicia provides TA. See, making the connections. Thank you. Aaliyah?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Berry, community-based social worker. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are so knowledgeable, and just the way you break it all down is super helpful. I think my question is regarding the eligibility criteria and how you all came up with not only how did you come up with that eligibility criteria of what to dispatch star to, but who came up with the eligibility criteria? Were those teams interdisciplinary? Was there law enforcement on those teams? Did they always agree with that eligibility criteria? Because I'm sure there's some nuances that they don't understand. Was there like disagreements about eligibility? And how and who also had the final approval of approving that final list that Star now gets dispatched to? Thank you.
No, that's a great question, and I am going to speak because those conversations predates my time with the city. So I'm going to speak based on what I have learned. But if anybody's interested in talking to somebody who was there, I can get you in contact with somebody on my team. The bottom line was it started with the 911 team. So the 911 team, the leadership team here, had a really good understanding of what are the call types that come through, right? We know what we do day in and day out. So what are the call types that come through that tend to be person focused and are least likely to have an associated, co-occurring criminal activity or an element of danger, right? So on that list on that slide, it was things like welfare checks, assists, trespassing unwanted person. So in Denver, we have one nature code that is both trespassing unwanted person. We're not talking about criminal trespass. Somebody breaks into your home, unless they're having a mental health crisis and they don't know where they are. Okay, that could potentially be for Star. We're talking about somebody who's, in the 7-Eleven and they're refusing to leave and they're clearly unhoused and they just need somebody to come talk to them. Those are calls that would be perfect for Star. That was kind of the starting point. The pilot for the program was being run by the Denver Police Department. So it was actually our police chief who really was an advocate for this. And so Denver Police was at the table in kind of helping to kind of create that initial list. But I can say, because I have been here for this, the expansion of those nature codes has been entirely the work of the leadership team here at Denver 911, where we have identified calls that, so one that we added was family disturbance. Now, anybody who works in law enforcement will tell you that domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls that police can respond to because there's a lot of heightened emotion and the potential for violence is certainly there. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about disagreements with non-romantic family members. So you would be amazed how many times people call 911 because they can't get their teenager to go to school. Their teenager is refusing to go to school, so they call 911. Well, all right, we can send a cop to come talk to your teenage son and say, hey, you need to go to school. Or we could send a clinician who's going to show up and be like, hey, what's going on? Right? There may be a underlying mental health need that is just unknown at that time. So those are the kinds of things that we've slowly been adding. I mentioned that we kind of have a suspicion that there's some additional expansion that could be done. We haven't really gotten into that, mostly because we've got to expand the response portion of STAR. STAR is only able to respond to about half of the calls that are STAR eligible because we just don't have enough vans and enough teams. So that's been our primary focus is, okay, let's expand the field capability. And then once they start, having nothing to do, okay, then let's start finding more work for them. But the initial conversations, yes, there were, I should also say there were clinicians that were a part of the Mental Health Center of Denver that were a part of those conversations as well, and 911 and police. And then now, the other thing I forgot to mention, when operational oversight of the STAR program, it's bounced around the city a little bit because we're trying to figure out what to do with it. cities like Albuquerque, Durham, and Seattle, I think, are the gold standard. What they've done is they've created a Department of Community Safety or Neighborhood Safety that is within public safety, but separate from the police department and the fire department and everything else. And then within those offices or departments, that's where their alternative response and their co-response programs live. And I know we're coming up on time, so I'll try and wrap up. In Denver, we haven't quite figured that out yet, frustratingly. So operational oversight has bounced around. There was a time where it lived in my shop. I was operationally responsible for the STAR program. So I created a STAR program manager position that was designed to be a licensed clinical social worker, somebody who understood this world, who could then inform what we do in 911. This is subject matter expertise that we don't have. And so we needed that kind of that knowledge base to help us figure out, all right, what are the culture shifts we need to make? What are the operational shifts we need to make? That position, even though it no longer reports to me, still lives here at Denver 911. So I can walk down the hall and talk to Tandis, our LCSW, who manages the operations of the program. And she then is a part of those conversations as we continue our work to expand and evolve the program.
And I think it's, oh, sorry, Aaliyah, go ahead.
Super quick. If they disagreed on the eligibility criteria, was law enforcement the final say?
Fortunately, no. Usually it's the city attorney that's the final say if there's any disagreement. But because we are a separate agency, and because I am the chief of police's peer, then any disagreement, we can go to the executive director of public safety, city attorney's office, but it's more of a conversation and less of a dictate of, no, we disagree, here's what you're going to do. And fortunately, in my experience in the last 5 years, we've not had anything where it's come down to that. We are incredibly fortunate in Denver that we have a police department that is very progressive and kind of very forward thinking. So I recognize how lucky I am to have partners that I do.
And I think that's really important for here in New Jersey. And I think that's probably a larger conversation that we will have sometime in the future, because so those guide cards and those questions, both your Arrive teams have been developing that with their PSAPs, depending on where they are. So in some locations, they're making the determination about whether or not they're sending out a co-responder team or the screening service directly when the call comes into 911. Our partners over at 988 also went over those cards with Michael and his team about what the appropriate questions are. And I think he alluded to that earlier, that there are some legal questions that are being discussed on a state level, and they're potentially going to have to be discussed at a local level, because as he mentioned, many of the PSAPs themselves they're not state agencies, they're municipal agencies. So there's going to be municipal council that have to weigh in, which is why in our meetings with the groups, the pilot programs, as well as one of our early meetings here, we talked about what we think here at OACR is really important, and it's making sure that that all of the pilot programs are talking to their local counterparts, whether it's the PSAP or their police department, their screening agency, their 988 responding MCORTS teams, to make sure that everybody's sort of on the same page and to share information, because many of those questions have already been developed and everybody's sort of on board about what those questions should be. It's a liability question that the PSAPs have asked locally and statewide about what's their liability if they dispatch something that isn't to law enforcement, if they dispatch to a citizen rather than to police, fire, or traditional medical. So and those are questions that are being discussed. So I think, Aaliyah, you're right where we all are in this conversation. I think New Jersey is probably further along than the public would really think that we are in having these conversations. And again, it's a little bit different to try to do a statewide model than it is to do a local model. So we're hoping that our pilots really get much further and actually provide some really great input back to us at the state level. I know we're running up on time, Felicia, did you want to take one more question before we?
Yeah, I think Lisa has her hand up again. Right, okay.
Sorry. Locally, as an advisory group, can we, is there a list or anything provided to the municipalities that, hey, these are all the different systems that are here, like Arrive or this, Arrive, well, all the things you just said, Tiffany, right? So that as these teams are doing the work and launching, they're aware of what's there and the resources that these local cities have or local municipalities have so that they can communicate. So that, they, like you guys said, Andrew, that one of the things that I thought was very important is that follow-up process. Like, knowing what to do now once you respond. Hey, these are the local organizations already doing the work, and maybe groups that are doing, new to this, they might not know all that's available, and they can start communicating as they're launching their programs.
So in answer to your question, Lisa, my answer to everything is always there's a mental health special needs working group in every single county that has those people to the table. Now, again, you guys are working on a city basis, so the actual person in Patterson may not be at the table, but their counterparts should be, and those are run through the county prosecutor's offices. So at that very first meeting of the providers, we tried to connect you all with those people. So I think Seth Glacken was on that meeting and other members of their team. But the mental health special needs working group is always a great place to start. And I can say that in Patterson or in Passaic County in particular, you've got a really great mental health administrator and really great collaboration happening at that table. And I'm sure that they're ready. We have warned them that you're all calling. So.
Thanks. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, special thank you to Michael and Andrew for the information today. It was amazing. Obviously much needed, right? We all have so many questions and are learning so much. So Anne and myself will be just gathering some resources to send to everyone next week. I have some time off this week, so it'll happen early next week. But thank you, everyone, and then we'll meet again in August. I realize there's no chat function in the government style of or the government's Zoom account, so you should have the registration link for that. But if not, please reach out to us or to Tiffany for that registration link for August. And yeah, we'll keep you posted with an agenda and a topic that we think will be very relevant as well in response to the initial survey. So yeah, that's it from us. I don't think, unless Tiffany, if there's anything else you need to cover, but thank you everyone for your participation today. I hope everyone has a good rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.